Good morning. How's everybody today? Now that it's
Good
Friday.
morning.
Good
Happy
morning, Michael.
Friday.
Good morning, TGIF.
Good
Fantastic.
morning.
It looks like a few of you are having a good morning. There you go. Friday. Finally Friday.
Good morning, Michael.
Isn't it isn't it long weekend?
Yes, indeed. It's a long weekend. All day Saturday.
Hooray!
Wow.
Yeah, you have Monday too. Yep. Fantastic. So that's great. This is a nice long weekend. You get to study and practice all weekend long. Isn't that exciting? So here's a little treat for you. I've actually placed an extra file in the chat. So inside the chat, there is another file, and I'd like you to download that. Remember, the little three dots at the end of it, if you just click on that, you can actually download, and it'll allow you to actually download that file. It's a little different. It's got more things in it that we need today. So I've thrown that together this morning so that we would have that available to us. So let me just drag this out of the way. There we go. Phenomenal. There we go. So can you see my screen right now?
Yes, Michael.
Yes.
Okay, good job. Are there any questions before we begin? Anything that you're having difficulty with up to this point?
Yes, Michael.
Yep.
Um, I have made my project into Excel. My laptop is connected to the office laptop. I mean, like office computer,
Yep.
and now I have to upload it onto Cengage just to submit it, right?
Yep.
And I don't know how to do it because yesterday I did my project. I tried to upload it, and I don't know somehow what happened. It just got deleted.
It got deleted.
So I did it again because I tried to find it in my laptop and everything, recycle bin and everything. I couldn't find it at all. So I made the project again, and I don't know how to like upload it. If you can just show me.
Yep. I'm just logging in again.
Thank you.
And okay. And Excel. So here we have the, let's say you're turning in this particular project. You would click on your project,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll notice that if you have actually downloaded it, once I click on start, if I've already downloaded it once, it will automatically bring me to this screen, which says that I can upload it. However, if you wanted to download it again, you can just click on back and it will take you back here again and you can download. But to upload, all you have to do is make sure that the name of the file is exactly what it says here. And it will have your name in it, not mine. And it will be number 2. So you just have to remember that when you're saving the file, you save it as number 2. And by default, it should automatically save it into My Documents. So that's the folder it should be in. So you can always check that. Let me just jump back here for a second. So when you actually are, let's say you're getting your files, you can always check inside of My Documents or Documents, depending on the version of Windows you're currently using. And if you can't find it there, you may find it inside of Downloads, because that's where you originally downloaded it. And when you saved it, you may have saved it back to that particular folder. So that's just to find it. So once you actually decide to upload it, you click on this icon, this big rectangle, okay? you find your file, which usually is going to be either in documents or in downloads. Again, it depends on where you saved it. When you're saving it, always check the address that it tells you up here so that you know which folder it's actually going into. And it's usually downloads or it's documents. It's one of the two. So just keep that in mind. When you find it, then all you have to do, and I know mine is in downloads, so I'll go in here. I would just click on it and
Okay.
then click on open. And what it's going to do is it will upload that to this particular folder. Now, the one I've chosen is incorrect, so that's why I get this red line. But if it's the same name, it will upload it, and it will also allow you to continue a little bit further, and it will immediately mark it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So once you've uploaded it, you'll also get an option to print the report. I strongly recommend that you print
Yes.
that
Yeah.
report. In other words, download it so you can see it.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Not a problem. Just keep in mind, guys, that sometimes you have a question and others have the same questions. So don't be afraid to speak up and just ask your questions. Because as I said, sometimes other people are a little afraid to speak up during the class, but it's to everyone's advantage that we clear up any kind of issues that might be occurring in the background. So now that you've downloaded that file, and I definitely want you to download it, it is inside of the chat. So let me just pull this across again so you can see that. Inside the chat, that file is there. It's an Excel document. And once again, click on those three little dots and then just simply download it for yourself as well so that you have a copy of it. This one's a little different from the one I shared before. So just keep that in mind. It is a little bit different. I'm just going to download this one file myself. There we go. Fantastic. So this here today, we have some training that we're going to do, which is a little bit different because now we're dealing with formulas. Now, this particular sheet that I provided you actually has a lot of material in it that you don't really need. This is basically something I use for the advanced course as well as this particular course. But this particular sheet that we're going to take a look at first, we definitely need to know because there are some formulas that are used very frequently. Now, some of them, depending on the company, may not be used quite as frequently, but we definitely need to take a look at some of them, and they're all listed here, and we're going to take a look at each one of those, including round. And of course, there are a lot of other ones we're going to look at today as well. So make sure that you have some little booklet or something you can write in or some paper you can write on, because there are some things you want to probably take note of, especially in the way a formula is actually created. But the first thing we have to talk about is actually one of the most important things within this program, and that is the order of operations. And I've kind of put it up here for you to make sure that you can actually see that. Let me just zoom up a little bit so we can see it more clearly. This order of operations is really important because Excel is a computer program, and therefore it is not a human being, and it can't rationalize the way you and I would. So we basically know when we add numbers together, we multiply them, or even we divide them, we know what we're trying to accomplish. But the program doesn't know that. So it uses a very specific type of approach, a set of rules. And its rules are that, first of all, multiplication always takes place first. And then the second thing that will happen is if there is any division, it will take place. So multiplication first, and then it will default to dividing, and then it will go to adding, and then it will go to subtracting. So there's an order to the way things happen. Now, I've kind of given you 3 examples here where I could have gone on for a long time, and given you many different possibilities. I've used brackets to isolate things because it really does have an impact, and a very significant impact. So let me just kind of zoom up to this. Just going to zoom up to the selection here. I want you to notice something, that I'm using only 1 plus 3 plus, 1 plus 3 times 2 divided by 4 times 5. And if I just use that formula, in other words, there is an equal sign in front of this, and if I open it up, you can actually see there is an equal sign. So it tells it that it has an operation to do, but there are no brackets there. And because there's no brackets, it actually adds up to 8.5. And how does that happen? Because it does the following. It multiplies 3 times 2. Remember, it's multiplying first. And it's also multiplying 4 times 5. So it's getting 20 here, and it's getting 6 at the top. So 6 divided by, because dividing is the second thing it does. And then it comes back and it adds 1. So it's kind of important that we understand that the program will always default to multiply the numbers first, and then it will divide them, and then it will add them, and then it will subtract. So we need to remember that, because as you can see here, it's the same numbers. I've just put them in brackets to isolate them so you can see what would happen if I decided to isolate these things. In other words, I wanted it to add these numbers together first, so that instead of 3 times 2, it was 4 times 2. So the 3 plus the 1 makes 4, and times 2, that means 8, instead of 6 at the top here plus 1, eventually 1, and that's at the end of it after it's been divided by 20. So by putting a bracket here, I've changed the actual number. And even more so, when I actually look at this last one, I've decided to make sure that the 4 and the 5 are multiplied together, but it's also going to multiply 2 times 4. And look at the result. We get a totally different result. So it's really important to understand that when you want to isolate things and you want to add them together, you want to subtract them, or you want to divide first, that you put those elements into a bracket so that it happens independently. And then the result of it is actually multiplied or divided or something else after that. So it's really important to remember multiplication takes place first, and then it will go through that statement and look for division. If it can't find it, it will automatically jump to adding numbers together, and then it will subtract. And as you can see, and these examples are really poignant to you as well, because this is the number up here, 1 plus 3 times 2 divided by 4 times 5, but it will actually multiply everything first, then it will divide, then it will add, and if there was any subtraction, it would then subtract. So it's important to remember to isolate in brackets when you want to separate the information for specific results. So just keep that in mind as we go forward, especially when it comes to how you want the arithmetic to take place within a formula or a calculation. You must actually make sure that there is some kind of separation for those numbers. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, Michael.
Okay. Now, I suggest that you just carry this on further on your own as well later. I'd like you to just keep going here, maybe separate the 2 and the 1 plus 2 times 2, put a bracket around that as well. You can have many layers of brackets and just see what the combinations do so that you can get an idea of what happens when you isolate numbers with brackets and what is the end result, because it will diametrically change the results that you get. Now, there's a number of formulas that I have here. I've got this little table here which has numbers and names in it. And I'm going to use these formulas to play around a little bit. One of them here, I've actually written out the logic behind it. You don't have to know this. It's just to your advantage to see it. This is what would happen if I did it by hand. If it's an even number, in other words, the range that I take here, if there's an even number of rows or even number of numbers, then it will give me an average. So this is in the middle. But if there's an odd number, it's actually going to give me the middle value. Now, right now I have 2, 4, 6, I have 7, so I have an odd number, which is great because that's going to show me the middle value. In other words, right in the middle. And the middle value, if I look at these numbers correctly, is probably going to be 21.19. So I'm going to start off with averaging first. And what average does is it takes all these numbers and then it divides them. So there are 7 here. It's going to add all 7 together, and then it's going to divide them by 7 to find what's the middle value. So I'm just going to put in equal, and I have several choices once again. And this is actually very important. I can either put a function in here, such as insert the function, or I can type average in here if I want to as well, or I can go back to the Home tab and I can use this epsilon figure, which is the sum, use the drop down and use average here, or I can go to formula. This is kind of like information overload at this point. And I can use the drop down function here for the epsilon and choose average here, or insert from here as well. So there are a lot of different ways of actually approaching this. I'm going to use a simple approach. I'm just simply going to click on this insert function. And as soon as I do this, I get this nice little dialog box. And for those of you who are a little challenged, you know, it takes a little while to get used to this. This is just understood. It will take you a little while to get used to it. So if I click on average here, it's going to tell me what it does and also how to set it up. And I'm reiterating now, I'm telling you what I've told you before. Whenever there is a comma inside those brackets, it means that I take an individual range or I take an individual number, and the comma will add another number to it. So I can add something else after that comma and add those numbers together. But in our case, we're going to use a range, which is using a colon in between. So I'm going to click OK. And here it says, what is the first number? Now, what it's suggesting is I can either click on just one cell, and then for the next number, I can click on another cell, and it'll just keep adding number here until I'm finished. But we can also use that colon. So I can just click on this cell and drag it down, and you'll notice that it now says that there is number in here. Now, there's a reason for this. I named this. I gave it a name. But what we would really have here is B3 all the way down to B9. So this would say B3 colon B9. And that would actually show me that we have an entire range. It also tells me what the average already is. It's already determined it. It's evaluated it. And it's saying the number in the middle here, the range, if there are 7 numbers in total and they're all added together, and we have divided it by the number of numbers there, which is 7, then the average number in between them all will actually be 22.4. And that's exactly what it's come up here with. It's just simply rounded this huge number down to 22.04. And the reason it says 04 is because we're using the number format for that cell, so it has 2 decimal places. So if I click OK, that's exactly what it pops in there. And no matter what I do here, if I change these numbers a little bit, so let's just say I change the 30, and I changed that to 38. Now remember, we have 22.4, so if I change that and I now press tab to accept the new value, it immediately changes my formula as well. So I get a different result. Median is a little different from average. Average looks for the center value. Median looks for the exact center value. So in this case here, I'm going to type in equal and median. Okay, I'm just typing it in. I sometimes find it easier to just simply type in what I want. And by the way, as you begin to type these things, it usually tries to tell you. So let me just go back a little bit, and now I'll put in E. And you notice it jumped and it said, oh, do you want median? So if that's the case, that this is the formula I want because there are no other formulas that start with ME, then I'll just double click on it. So double click on that median and it automatically puts it in for me. And then of course, anything within those brackets is going to be an argument. And I want to make sure that what I need in here, it says I need to put a number and then I need to put another number. Well, I can put a range in instead. So instead of putting one number and then a comma and then the next number and a comma and the next number, I'm just simply going to select this whole range by clicking with the left button and dragging it down. And now I have that entire range. And again, as I said, I've actually named it. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. So here I've ranged, and I'm going to close the bracket. And I'll press enter. And there is the middle value. Now you notice it's not the same. 2318 is because there is a 2318 in the middle here. And when it comes to the absolute middle value here, the median value is this one down here at the bottom. So it's 2119. This is the absolute middle value within the 7 values. The average is the distinct value between the 7. So it's the absolute middle. This is the middle value. So I know that's a little confusing. 99.9% of the time, most people want to know what the average is. But there are times when you want to know the middle value of the 7 values that are here. Which one would actually be in the middle somewhere. And then, of course, there's also, how do I determine the largest value? You know, sometimes we have this little 7 entries here of numbers, but sometimes you have tens of thousands of numbers. Think of it this way. If you were working at a Walmart or a McDonald's, they have billions of customers. So they may have millions and millions of transactions taking place on a daily basis, and they probably want to know which is the largest value that they took into the cash register. Well, to do that, we can use the max value. So in this case, I'm going to put in equal. I'm going to type in MAX. I'm going to, again, you'll notice that the moment I start to type in values, it shows me the formulas that I might just simply click on. And sometimes instead of, writing the whole thing out, you see it here, just double click on it because it'll put in the bracket for you. And it gives you the syntax, which is what is the way you need to type it in. So now, once again, remember, the comma tells me I can take individual numbers and then put another comma, another number, another comma, another number. But let's face it, we're lazy, so let's just select a range. Fantastic. Now, I'm selecting this range so that you get the experience of doing so, but I could have just typed in the name number because I've already named it, and we can actually see that when we choose the, well, in this case here, it's just going to show me the formulas because I'm doing a formula. But you could actually see number as well will actually appear as one of the options that is available. But again, I'm doing a calculation. So I'll close that up. And this will show me the largest value. So let's just see if we can determine which one it is. And as I go through here, I can see that 41.21 is the largest value of these 7. But if you had hundreds and even thousands of numbers and you're trying to find the largest one, then this would be a great calculation. And if I press enter, it automatically found that 41. And it rounded it up a little bit as well because I was only using 2 digits to define it. The next one is just as obvious. It's the smallest value, so the minimal value. And if I look up here, I can see 10.5. This is the smallest possible value. So once again, if we had a long list, it would be nice to use a formula to find it. So I'm just simply going to type in equal. And this time I'll take insert function. I could have typed it in, but we'll just choose this option and we'll go to minimum. Now here is a good example. Not always do those, let's say, formulas that you want to use, do they appear here. So I'm just simply going to come up here to the top and I'm going to type in min. So this is minimum, okay? And I'm going to say, go find it. So go, and there it is, minimum. So I'm going to choose minimum, and it tells me what it will do. And I'll click OK. And it says, is this the range you want? And the answer is not likely. So I'm going to choose down here this range again. There's my range. And it tells me that the smallest value is 10.5 in that range, which we just determined. Yes, that's right. That's exactly what it is. So if I click OK, it will insert that. And if I were to change this to 11.5, we go, so it's now 11.5, you'll notice it changes everything that is associated with that range. Okay, so now it's actually changed 11.5, but it also changed the average because the average was based on adding all these up and then dividing it by the 7 numbers that are there. So anytime you make a modification, the beautiful feature of functions is that they dynamically change the values for you. Now I threw in some as well, just to kind of show you. I'm going to do it the different way this time. Instead of just simply putting a range in, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So I'll put in some. There you go. And since we can use the comma, I'm going to say, well, let's take this number. I'll put a comma from the keyboard. I'll click on the next number, and I'll put a comma in. And I'll choose the next number. Now, you get the idea. It would have been a lot easier just to take the range of it. But I'm going to put another comma. And then I'm going to play a little game here with you. Instead of just doing this over and over and over and putting a comma in between, because I've already done that and shown you that you can add these numbers together, I'm going to use the rest of them as a range. And this is actually important. So here we go. I've just selected the last 4 numbers, and you can see that there is a colon here. So the colon tells me between B6 and B9, add all the numbers together. And I'll close it with a bracket. But I want you to see that that comma means I can take individual numbers, or I can take individual ranges and separate them by adding them together using that comma, or I can use the colon and show a range in here as well. So all these 7 numbers are there, 4 numbers in the range, and 3 additional numbers have been added independently, and that gave me my whole 7 that are in that particular range of numbers. So this time I don't have the name num. It's actually, in this situation, it's actually all 7 numbers. So once again, I'll press, whoops, we got somebody just jumped in wanting to do something there. Okay. So, so this is actually adding all of these numbers up, and it's giving me, in this case, it's giving me 163.26. Loveline, okay. Loveline has just entered the building. No camera, but taking the charge. Okay. Fantastic. The next one is called today. Now, today, sometimes we use this because, let's put it this way. I save a document. I may want to print it at some point, but I want to put in today's date. In other words, the day that I actually do the printing is the day that I actually want to have the date represented. So if I actually save this document and it's opened up 3 months from now, let's say, and when you open it up, because the formula is in that particular cell, the date that it's opened will show up. And therefore, if I wanted to print it, it would have the date that it was actually represented for. So I'm going to put in an equal, and I'm going to put in today. Oops, today. And once again, there is an argument, and for today, there is no argument. So we know that there's nothing needs to go in there, but the formula requires that there be brackets. So in this case, when I press enter, it will look for today's date on the computer. So this is where it gets the date from. It gets it from your computer. So if your computer has a different date on it, or you're dealing with somebody in another time zone, you're going to get a different date for them when they're actually choosing it. And there's today's date, September the 4th, 2020. And it's automatically in there. So if I were to save this document and open it up a week from now, let's say on the 15th, so September 15th, as soon as I open it up, this would automatically change from the 4th to the 15th. So today means today. Now is another one. Again, this could be because time is involved here. So I'm just going to use this formula and put in now. And now also has an argument. Okay, and there is nothing that goes in there because it is the current moment. So if I click OK, there it again. Now we have September and once again the same date. Time actually is the same thing again, so I'll put in time. And once again, you'll see that there are two formulas. There are time value and time. Again, the argument, there is no argument. And I'm simply going to press enter and I'll get the time right now. Oops. What did we do here? Problem with my formula. What did I type in? Oops. I'm not typing in a type of formula. Okay, why is that not coming up? Time. Okay, so our, we'll say for minutes, we'll say 12. And seconds, we'll say 0. So I do have to put an argument. Okay, I'm going to take another look at that one. That's not the way it should have came up. So we can actually, with time, it's telling me I do have to put an argument in. I put in whatever hour it happens to be. It's 8 o'clock. And for minutes, right at the moment, it happens to be 34 minutes. And we'll say 0 seconds. And of course, there's my time. I'm going to check that formula because that's not what should have came up. So just want you to make sure that you understand how to use today. You know how to use the sum. You know how to use minimum, maximum. median. You're going to see these ones a little bit later in a quiz. And this you'll see on Tuesday for your quiz, by the way, next week. And then, of course, average. And these are the ones you see the most frequently. These ones come up a lot, especially in the business community. We use these a great deal, simply because it makes life so much easier when you're using these. There are other ones we're going to experiment with in a few minutes. But one of the other things I wanted to touch upon was this one here, which is round. Now, there are many different ways of using, excuse me, this particular formula. I'm going to type in equal. Then I'm going to put in round. Now, you'll notice here that as soon as I put an R, I can see all of the formulas that start with an R. So RU, and there's my round. So I'm just going to click on it rather than type the whole thing in. And there it is. Now, round tells me I have to choose a number, and then I have to decide how many decimal points. Remember when you were in grade school that they told you that any number that was less than 5 was not rounded up. Any number 5 and greater was rounded up to the next decimal. So what are the next integral number? So what we're going to do here is we're going to choose a number, and that will be this 12.0410. I'm just going to click on that. And I'll put a comma because now it says, now that you have your number, how many decimal points do you want to round up? Now, this can be a positive or a negative. It is extremely rare to use a negative, okay? A negative will go in the opposite direction to the decimal point. In other words, it goes to the left, but we want it to go to the right in our case. So we wanted to look at that 0410. And in this case, we're going to round it up to, let's say 1. So let's just see. Now, 4 is less than 5, so it's not going to round it up. So let's just put it up to 1. If I put a 0, it will round up all the way to the decimal point. Number 1 will take it to the 0, and it look at the 4. Is the 4 greater than 5 or less than 5? Well, in this case, it's less than 5, so it shouldn't actually modify it. There we go. So it didn't actually modify it. So that 0 does not change because the 4 is not 5 or higher. So let's just prove that. Nothing worth doing if you don't prove it. So let's change that 4 to a 5. Okay, so now that I've changed that 5, you notice that it automatically has rounded up that 5 to a 1 in the next decimal place. So in this case here, instead of a 0, we now have a 10 because the 5 has been rounded up to the next side, the left side. I'm also going to change this again so that we can still prove this. I'll take the 4 back and I'll change the 1 to a 5. So this means the 4 will turn into a 5. And since we're still rounding up to 1 character, in other words, we want it to come to that 0, what will it change? But this is still under the number scheme. So because this is still number, we're still going to get 2 decimal places, but it's going to round it up. So what displays will be rounded up. So once again, I'm going to accept that value. The 5 will now change the 4 to a 5, which will now change the 0 to a 1. Whoops. It didn't round it up. Why didn't it round it up? This is not my day. Okay, I have to find out why that didn't round up. It should have rounded that one up. That's amazing. Let me just change this formula. See what happens here. Yeah, it should have rounded all the way up. I'll have to come back to see why that didn't do what it did. Fantastic. So if I drag this down, of course, it will round up each one of these as it goes along. So the round function allows me to round it up. Now, there's something I want you to understand. Within formulas, a formula can be inside of another formula. So you can have formulas that are what we call nested, where maybe one expression that we have here, like let's say average, maybe in the average, I also wanted to round up. So inside of that formula, I can actually have a round function as well. So it will round up the range to a specific value as well. So we can actually have formulas within formulas. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. The rounding I'm going to have to double check because it's not functioning the way it's supposed to function. And it could be something wrong with my version of Excel right now. But it should actually have gone up. Let me just put that back to 0 to refresh it. Okay. I'll definitely have to go back to round again. So these are the simple ones, and I want you to become really good at using them. And remember, you can modify these in any way you want to. In fact, I have taken these as individual numbers, and then I went and put a range on it as well. So it would actually give me a way of experimenting a little bit with that formula. Let's take a look at something else here, which is also very important. And that happens to be the quick analysis toolbar. So that's the next tab across the bottom. Excuse me. We talked about this before. This is actually a very nice little tool, and it makes life a lot easier for you, to be quite honest with you. So you can always experiment with this one as well. And the easiest part about this is it will do the work for you. You don't even have to think about it per se. So here, with this quick analysis toolbar, I need to select something. So I'm simply going to select the numbers here. There you go. And you'll notice it appears right at the bottom. Now I didn't have to choose both columns. I could have chose one, but I kind of want to use both columns for a moment. So here's my little icon, quick analysis toolbar. I'm going to click on it, and there it is here. Now, one of the beautiful features about this product is that you can actually determine values based on, let's say, visuals. Sometimes numbers can be a little difficult to see, especially if you have thousands of them. And sometimes to see tabs or color gradients can actually give you a better indication. Now on the Home tab, we could have done this as well because conditionalizing is the same thing we're looking at right now for formatting. So in conditionalizing, I could have done the same thing here. And this would allow me to see different variations. And of course, there are all kinds of combinations that I could use. And I could customize this too to make it easier for me to determine what's the largest value, the smallest value. And if I wanted to determine, let's say, something like the top 2 numbers, well, I could actually choose, let's say here it says top 10. So I'll click on that and I'll make this 2 instead of 10. And I'll decide what color I would like. Well, I'd like to have yellow instead. So when I click OK, there's the top 2 numbers within that column. So this is nice. This is a beautiful feature where I could actually come in and then be able to determine the top numbers. Then I could go and look at the bottom numbers. So you can actually do a lot of different things here. Fantastic. So let's choose this again. Fantastic. And this time we've got 3. And of course I can come in here and use colors, or as I showed you yesterday, we can use icons. And by the way, and let me go back to the regular here. Icons, there are many different types of icons that can be used. Little stars, we can use partial stars, we can use these elements, little types of icons that you want to use, check marks. Everybody with an X in it gets fired. Anybody with a check mark gets to keep their job. So if you were analyzing salespeople, this might be a good way of doing it. And of course, there are lots of different icons. And in fact, you can even create your own. So once again, there are some really nice features. And with the quick access toolbar, it just makes life a lot easier, a lot quicker to do. So again, it's looking for greater than a specific value. We can change that, by the way. And of course, we can even clear it out, make sure that they're all gone. The other element that we can do here, and I showed you this one too yesterday, where we can actually create charts based on the data that we have selected. Now, there are different types of charts that are available. In fact, you can even go in and decide, I'd like a different kind of chart. And therefore, we could choose something totally different. And this is all based, it's showing you what it would look like based on the data that you have. So if you have a lot of data, it's going to show you a very messy type of chart. But you can look at different kinds of chart to get an idea of what would it look like if I chose that chart for this particular instance. And of course, the lines, of course, what's the greater line in those? So different types of chart. And of course, there are still other types of chart here as well, such as the pie chart. And these are nice charts to have. This shows you the data that you have selected. And of course, there's waterfalls, okay, different approach. The funnel, the combination, which is actually a combination of several different kinds of chart. So there's combining that particular chart, or let's say I want that chart. So I can combine charts together. So different kinds of charts could actually be generated automatically. So I'm just going to generate this one automatically. I'll click OK. There's my chart, and I can move it anywhere I want to. We'll talk about charts next week, but I can change any bits of information here. So I'm just going to put in example. And of course, I can change that. I can do all kinds of modifications. As you see up here, there are different styles that can be used as well. So there's really no limitation. And once again, since this is now being examined again, I'm going to go back in here. And now I can actually use my totals. So instead of having to type in those formulas, this was created to help those people who aren't so good at using Excel. Now you're becoming experts at this, and therefore you can type in your own formulas. But there are times when people just don't know what to do. So we could actually use sum, and you notice right at the bottom here, it's going to put the sum in for those two columns. We could put an average in here. We could put in a count. In other words, how many entries are there? There's 9 rows down, so it tells me there are 9. And remember one thing I told you yesterday about count, and that is if there is a space in any one of those rows, it won't count beyond it. It will only count up to it. Totals, once again, we can see the total percentage here, and it gives me that percentage. The running balance, okay, it's adding them all up one after the other. And then, of course, we can go to summation, and that gives me the sum along the edge here. So that's across, it's counting across on the lines. And of course, there are other ones here as well. And each one of these is going to give us a real good example of you don't have to type in the formula, it will do it automatically for you. So I haven't clicked on any of these because if I click, it automatically inserts it. But I just want to see what would it look like if I did click on it. Okay, it says there are 2 numbers here in a row. That's right. There is a column B and a column C, so that's 2 numbers. Piece of cake. One of the functions which is really very valuable is this table. Now, one of the things about tables, and I'm just going to turn that off for it's bothering me. One of the things about tables is that it allows you to perceive the data and also be able to filter it and sort it. Now, we will talk about the pivot tables much later, but in this case here, if I convert this into a table, it's showing me what it would look like if I did that. And those little drop down arrows where it says column 1, column 2, etc., that will allow me to do a lot of different functions. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on it. There it is. Now I actually have this. But you notice something has gone wrong here. Instead of actually using count, amount, and of course BR, it's actually created a new row. So I'm not thrilled with that. And the reason it created that is because it didn't see count, amount. I hadn't selected it. In fact, I've selected everything below that. So I'm going to go back and select that so that I can actually use that section of it. So I'm just going to reselect it again. There you go. And I'm now going to convert that into a table. So just keep in mind that according to how you choose your table, if you didn't get the field names, such as I have here count, amount, then the reason you didn't get them is because they were not selected. So once again, there's my table. So looking at table here, this is beautiful. I'm just going to select this part so we can see it a little bit more clearly. I'm going to zoom up to it. There we go. So this little drop down has a lot of options here, and I'm going to take a look at a number of them. The first is I can sort this alphabetically. Now, if I look at it, I'm choosing count. So I'm going to look at it in a numerical order. If I had names here, and I'm just going to type in something, I'll say A, and then below that, I'll say C, and below that, we'll say Q, and then below that, we'll say it's E, and below that, we'll say it's F. And the reason I'm doing this is just simply so that I can sort the information. Okay, so if I sort any one of these columns, it's actually going to sort the whole thing according to this. This will become a key in a sense. It'll sort the column that I choose to sort, but it will keep all this data selected with it. And I'm going to prove that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that we want to make sure that all of this particular row will always be connected to one another. So I'm going to change the color to yellow so that I know that when I sort this column with the A, C, Q, etc., that this data is going to stay with C. So I'm just simply going to sort it A to Z. There you go. And it does all the A's, and now it comes to the C. And look, the data is still there with the C. Well, it's also there with the A. So it hasn't actually sorted just that one column. It sorted the whole table by this one column. And you'll also notice here that that little arrow now has another arrow inside saying that you have actually sorted it. So I can reverse that. I can go to Z to A. Fantastic, which is just the opposite. A is now at the bottom. Okay. Or what I can do is I can sort by color. Okay, remember we did this before as well. There's my yellow. So I'll sort by yellow, and yellow is now at the top. So we have lots of choices here. In fact, I could decide that I only want the A. So I can uncheck everything else and display just the A. So this is filtering. And now it only shows me the A. But still, since there's that little arrow there and now a little funnel, it tells me that this particular cell is the one that has been sorted. And it has also been filtered. So I'm just going to click on it. And maybe I want to put the Q's in. So I'll put the Q in. And I'll click again. And now I have Q and A. So this allows me a lot of freedom. I can actually decide, select everything and put it all back in again. Or this is a really very powerful element. I can sort by very specific filters, or filter by very specific filters. Let's say that I want to filter this particular column by something very specific, or maybe the next column by something very specific. So if I came in here, let's say amounts, and I was only looking for numbers that were between, let's say 300, okay, and well, let's say 300 and 0. So I'll just simply click here because I want only the numbers that are between those values. So it must be, let's say between. So I'll choose between here. And it says it must be greater than or equal to, we'll say 0. And it must be less than or equal to, and I said 300. Okay, so that means my 1200 is going to disappear, my 365 will disappear, 368 will disappear, so let's do that. And you notice there is no value greater than 300, and there is no value less than, well, let's change that. Let's make it 155, so that'll eliminate the 152. So let's go back in here and modify that one. And you'll notice there's a check mark here now, so that means that one of these is actually active. And between, we're going to change that to 155. Fantastic. And I'll click OK. So this will remove that one. Yep, that's gone. So here we can filter these. We could even turn that off if I don't want it. I'll select everything again. Click OK. Everything is back again. And here we can do the same thing. We can actually turn off the sorting, so no fill colors. There we go. So once again, it's back to fundamentally where it would be. And we can, of course, again, sort that. So the beautiful feature here of using a table is that you can come in and you can reorganize the data according to what you're looking for. So if I was looking for the count, or I was looking for just the amounts to be in some particular order, or just let's say this abbreviation I put at the end here, it's in some kind of order, then it would help me a great deal to use a table and to filter. Now, I could create a table here as well. Okay, and that means I can modify this rather significantly. So if this area, and I'll just choose that area. Okay, and I can change the coloration of it if I wanted to. Right now it's the blue color, but I could choose some other color entirely, some other variation that I would like to have. And of course, when I actually have this table, I also have table design up here. So I could come up here and change these styles. And of course, I could import, export, do all kinds of stuff. But these are a little bit advanced topics. It's just, you shouldn't just stop. Just click on everything and see what happens. So it kind of helps a great deal when you can do that. And of course, inside of the data tab as well, we have sort and filter as well. So I didn't really have to make it into a table. I could have just sorted the content. If I sort it this way, it's a little different. Okay, so I'm just going to go backwards a little bit here. Fantastic. There we go. A little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. Fantastic. A little bit further. There we go.
Can you do that, the filtering and sorting, that level of filtering and sorting through the pivot tables as well?
Yes, you can. Yep.
Okay.
Pivot tables are extremely powerful. I'm not going to show you pivot tables right now because quite a few of you would be totally lost. But let me just show you here once again. I'm just simply going to select this. There is no table right now. It's just a little table that we've created, but no major table. And I'm going to sort it. Now, sorting here is different. If I click on it, it wants to know which column, because within a table, we have those little drop-down handles, and we can actually use those to sort the entire table according to which field we want. But in this case, it wants to know which field do you want to use. But there's something here that's really essential. And let me just show you what it is. Here I can see the names of the fields for each one of the columns. So count, it'll sort everything below count. It'll sort everything below amount or BR. But that's because of this one little checkbox up here. If I remove that, it will not know the difference between this top row and all of the data below it. It'll assume that they're all the same thing, and it will sort it accordingly. So this time, instead of having the count, amount, and BR, it'll actually say column 1, 2, and 3. So in this case here, column B, column C, or column D. Now, if I sort that way, and I'm going to show you that, so I'm going to sort it. This is smallest to largest value. It's going to sort this top row as well. And you notice that it's sorted it. It's thrown it down at the bottom because this would be a larger value, much larger than the numbers. So I'm just going to reverse that and show you the opposite. So if I choose that little box, it's now going to say, well, there are fields here, and it's only the data below the fields that you want to sort. So yeah, so let's sort count. And it says, what do you want to sort? Well, we can sort color, font color, or let's say we want to use the cell color if the cell had a particular color, or just the values or the format. In this case here, we'll choose the cell value. And of course, we can add more to it as well. If, for instance, we had 5 or 6 columns and we want to sort one column, and an example here would be, let's say a salesman has several customers. So first we want to sort by the name of the salesperson, and then we want to sort by the alphabetical name of their customer, and then maybe we want to sort by which customer during a particular period of time spent more money. Again, we could sort many different levels within the same sort. In other words, several different keys. So here again, smallest to largest, I'm going to choose largest to smallest, or we could even do it customized. So now this time it should actually give me the largest possible value. This one here should come up first, 368. Oh, 1200 we had there too, I didn't see that. So here's the largest value all the way down to the smallest possible value. And of course, the other data has been sorted according to this one. Piece of cake. Well, we can also change that around a little bit too. Let me just reverse it for a second. And let's say I want to sort it in a slightly different way. Maybe I want the amount. Okay. And then I want to choose the value and amount to be smallest to largest. But then I also want to do one other thing. I want to sort this by, let's say, another area, which is BR. Now I'm going to put something in there. It'll be A to Z. There you go. So now I'm going to change this a little bit. We're going to put in, what do we got here? R. And then we'll put in, whoops, sorry. We'll put an R again, and then we'll put a B. And then we'll put a B, we'll put an R, we'll put a B, we'll put an R, and we'll put a B. Okay, so now we can sort this column as well. So let's come back here. Whoops, let's put that back in there. Fantastic. And let's just sort this again. Select it. We'll sort this again. And this time again, we're using the BR and we want A to Z. So this B is going to come up first. And this is the second option. And you notice it's now changed it around again. So this time, whoops. Yeah, this time it's actually done the same thing. It has accumulated the values from the smallest value to the largest. And it has secondary sorting. Once this was sorted, it sorted the third column, and then, of course, the last column adapted accordingly. So that's something else we can do when we want to use tables. We can actually create those tables. The last part of this is the sparkle line. Sparkle lines are rather intriguing. It's kind of an indicator as to, is the value increasing or decreasing? And sometimes, as I said before, numbers eventually, your eyes get a little buggy and you may have difficulty focusing on the numbers because there may be so many of them. But sometimes if you can see graphically, and this is why a chart is so good, but let's see if we can see it graphically like this line. I can see that between the 1200 and the 152, there's a big drop. And of course, I can see that the 168.95 basically is the same thing, but it looks at that third column, which is a B, and it says, wait a minute now, that B is a little weird. So I'm going to take this column out for a moment, and I'll reselect this again. There we go. And we'll look at that sparkle line, and we'll look at it in that particular column. Fantastic. So now I can see it a little bit more clearly without that third column, that it's showing a major decline. And yet the other ones, basically, they're the same value, so I get a straight line. Of course, I can use this as well, or I can use, because there are two columns, I should be able to see two bars giving me an indication. This is not the best one for this particular circumstance, so we look at each one as being slightly different. Here at the top, we have 1200 and 152. Shows me that 1200 is very large graphically, and that the 152 is like a straight line underneath. So it's very, very far down. But again, it's great because I can now see a graphical representation of what it would actually look like. So sparkle lines are really useful tools for you as well. Piece of cake. Fantastic. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. Using that, again, it's just a question of selecting and then clicking on the icon that appears here, and you can then choose which particular tool you would like to use. Of course, we're learning that we can actually do this ourselves. We don't need to use this tool, but it makes it easier sometimes when you can do all of it at once. We talked about flash fill, so I'm going to leave that one for the moment. And I'm going to come to the next tool here, which is the if statement. You know, the if statement is a fascinating one because it allows us to choose criteria. In other words, and I've given you an example here as well, and we're going to type this one in so that you can see what happens over here. So the first one is, I want to know if the particular value, which is 60 there, which is C3, if that is actually less than 10. So we have 10 less, we only have 10 bananas, or we have less. If we have less than 10 bananas, then it's going to pop reorder in here. If, however, we have more than 10 bananas, we'll just get a little dash. In other words, don't reorder. So this would be for a store that's looking to add extras. And this could be for anything. If you're, we don't have enough, let's say, paper for the printer, and it's less than 100 sheets, then type in reorder, or yes, or no, or something. So I'm going to show you this one, and we're going to click in equal. I want you to type in if, and a bracket, because there is an argument here, and there are several different kinds of if. It says the logical test. Well, what is the test? I want to know if this 60 is below 10. Now, the reason you and I can see it definitely is not less than 10 is because I intend to copy this formula down. I'm going to fill the other cells with that formula so we can see whether or not they're less than 10. So instead of typing banana in here, I'm just going to click on the quantity, which is C3. Okay, and I'm going to use the less than. And I'm going to say it must be less than 10 units. Okay, and then I'm going to put a comma because it says put a comma in. And now it says, what am I supposed to do if it is true? So if this is less than 10, what should it actually do? Now, there's something you need to understand. You need to use quotation marks around whatever statement you want presented because it doesn't exist here. So I'm going to put in this because I want it to print to the screen. So we put quotation mark, and I'm going to say order. And now we could have put reorder, but I'm going to put just order for kicks. I can put anything I want in here. And I'll put in another quotation mark so that whatever is between those quotation marks, if it's true, that's going to print. I'll put a comma because it says the next value is what happens if it's not true? Well, in this case, I'm going to just put a little dash in there. So I'll put in quotation mark, I'll put a dash, and I'll put a quotation mark. Now I could have put a space in there as well. I could put in, no, please do not order. We have enough bananas today. Whatever you want to put in there. And I'm going to close it. So let's just review this quickly. The calculation here is, what is it you're looking for? I want to know if the number of the bananas is less than 10. If that's true, then I want it to print order. And if it's not true, I want it to put just a dash. So now when I press enter, it says, well, this is not true. Therefore, there's a dash there. So what if I copy this down? So I'm just going to double click that. There you go. And it says 8 is less than 10, 4 is less than 10, 9 is less than 10. So order for those particular lemons. So the if statement allows me to challenge information and find out whether or not it fits my requirements, my criteria. So the if statement is a very, very valuable one. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of if statement, but the if statement we just used is very simple. Once again, look at this yellow area for a moment. I'm asking it to look at a cell and then decide whether or not it is greater than, equal to, it equals, let's say, a value, which we're going to do in a moment. And whatever that condition is, if it's true, it's going to have a value here, whatever it is. We're going to use yes in a moment. And then, of course, if it's false, put that value in. And we're going to use no in a minute. So let's do it over here in the second little table that I have here. And I'm going to type in something very interesting here. I'm going to do the same thing, equal, if, I'm going to put a bracket in. Now it says, what's the logical test? Well, the logical test is, I want to know if banana is there. So I'm going to click on F3. Now, you never want to type in the name unless, of course, that's what you're really looking for. And I'm going to say, is it equal to banana? So we know that it says bananas, so I'm going to put that plural in there. I'll put a comma because that's my challenge. Is it equal to a banana? And if it is, then I'm going to put quotation. Yes, this is equal to a banana. And if it's no, put a comma, and I'll say no, it's not equal to a banana. And I'll close that bracket. So let's take a look. What I'm saying is, for that cell, if the word banana is in there, then it will say yes. If the word banana is not in there, it'll say no. And remember, the whole idea behind putting these formulas in is so that you can copy them and use them over and over again. So I'm going to press enter. There you go. Whoops, we did type something incorrectly. What did it not like? B-A-N-A-N-A-S, bananas. F3 equals bananas. I wonder if that's a protected word.
What about if you put a space after the comma? Value if true, comma, space, maybe?
Where yes is?
I'm not sure, but if you look where it says if logical tests, comma, space, it looks like there's a space there, but I'm not sure if that's going to work.
Oh, yeah, but that space doesn't have to be there.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to figure out why it's not accepting banana. Give me 1 second, I will figure it out. B-A-N-A-N-A-S is correct. F3 is equal to. Okay, it really doesn't like that for some reason. If F3, hold on. Nope. Wow. That's not nice. Okay, I have a quandary here. Why is that not working? F3. That cell equal to. So easy. Hold on. Okay. So because it's a variable and it's a name, I had to put the quotation marks around it. This is not the case with the older versions. So in this case here, what I've typed in is if this particular cell F3 is equal to, and I put quotations around it so it recognizes it as a unique variable. So bananas, then a comma, and what to do if it's right and what to do if it's wrong. So in this case here, because it is bananas, press enter. It says yes, and if I copy it down, of course it says that lemons are not bananas, apples are not bananas, oranges are not bananas, bananas are bananas, but lemons are not bananas. So this could actually be a really nice tool, and I can always come in here and say, instead of no, let's just put a space. Okay, and whoops. And it would be nice if I stopped clicking on other things. There we go. Press enter. It says yes, and now I'll copy that down, the correction. And now it shows me yes where the bananas are, and the rest of it no, because it's not a banana. Does that kind of make sense a little bit? I realize a little bit peculiar, especially the way the formula has to be typed up. Let me just open that up a bit more. Just going to copy that for a moment. And I'll print it down here. Oops. Mamma mia. Okay. So once again, the if statement, we have a condition that we are challenging it for. And if it were just a number, you wouldn't have to put those quotation marks. But the quotation marks are there because it's a variable. It's a text variable. and it doesn't actually exist anywhere. So I'm challenging it against this F3, and then a comma to determine what to do if it's true and what to do if it's incorrect. In other words, it's not true. Once again, I put a space in for the no, and therefore we now have spaces here as well. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone who has difficulty with that particular statement? Nobody so far? Okay, so the next one is we're going to jump the sum if. Sum if is a little bit challenging for you right now. I have put the formulas here if you want to play with it a little bit. And I've also created these as lists. So you can actually choose from these lists. And once you put the formula in, it'll take the information from these two lists. And you can actually decide what you want to challenge it, and it will automatically put that information into the formula. So we're going to jump to VLOOKUP and horizontal lookup. These are tools that are used very, very frequently in business. And there's two different types. This is the horizontal lookup, which is horizontally listing all the numbers. And of course, the vertical lookup, which is vertically setting up a table. And we're going to do both here in a moment. Now, I've actually created some here for you as well, where we can actually see the values. And this is the values for the price. And here's the price here, and you can see the formula at the top. So if you get a little bit lost with this one, it's easy enough to just take a look at what is going on in the background. And you can kind of trace it by analyzing it. So here we're going to, and I've created lists here for you. So you don't have to actually type in agent one all the way down here. There's already one here, which is a list, and there's my list. So I just pick whichever one I want, and that's going to change my formula. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on find the price. And let me zoom a little bit up here, just a little bit. There we go. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in VLOOKUP. So equal, and then V, and you'll see here it's actually listed. So VLOOKUP, click on it.
Michael, can you zoom a little bit more, please?
Say that again, please.
Can you zoom a little bit more, please?
More? Well,
Yeah.
I can't really zoom up anymore right now. And well, let me do it this way then. Because I need to see the table in order to add to it.
This is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, better. Thank you.
So in this case here, I'm going to type in my range because it says, what is the lookup value you want? Well, the lookup value I want is actually here where I say select the agent. And this is where I created a list. Now, you will be looking up the agent because VLOOKUP works with whatever is in the first column. Now, the first column in our case happens to be B, so it would be one of these particular individuals. But I'd like to be able to pick and choose, so I'm not just simply going to choose, let's say, one particular cell where I have agent number something in it. What I'm going to do is choose something where I can change that cell. And that's why I created a list here. So I'm going to click on I4 because I'm going to change I4 by using the list. I'll put a comma. So this is what I'm looking for. It then wants to know, where's the table? Well, here's the table right here. So I'm going to choose my table. There's my table. I've selected it. My whole table is selected at this particular point. And now I'm going to put a comma because the next thing says, well, what column do you want me to grab information from and plug it in here? So I kind of like to have the price. So the price is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns over. So that means I'm going to type a number 4. because it is the fourth column. I want it to bring back a value. It's going to challenge the first column, and then it's going to bring back a value in my table from the fourth column. Then I put a comma. Now, there are situations where you may actually have a variation. Maybe, let's say, agent number 1 has 2 entries instead of 1. Instead of 1 row, there are 2 rows for agent number 1. It will bring back an approximation. So if the value was 40 and a value of 45, it would bring in an approximation between the two if I put the word true in. So I want it to be an exact, the very first entry it finds. So in this case, I'm going to put in false. So I'm going to type in the word false. Fantastic, and I'll close the bracket. So let's take a look at what I'm asking it to do. I'm asking it to take the value in this cell I4, whatever it is, and to look inside of the first column to find it. Once it finds it, I want it to return the value that is associated on that row with the fourth column. And that's why I have the number 4 here. So once again, this cell is going to be challenged against this particular table, which we just selected, and it's going to look in the fourth column and return that value and only that value. So the false means choose the first one only. So press enter, and this should bring back nothing. And the reason it brings back nothing is because there's nothing in this particular cell. So as I said, I created a list for you so it would make life easier. So if I use this drop down and I choose, let's say, agent number 2, which should bring back a number 50 from the fourth column. So agent number 2, it brings back a 50. If I choose agent number 8, it brings back a 50. So where's agent number 8? There's 50. And if let's choose something different. We'll say this one 3. So I can come in here now and choose number 3. So let's scroll up. There's number 3. So I'll choose number 3 and it brings back a 20. So this is nice, especially if you had something that was, let's say, we had 50 columns wide and maybe 1,000 rows deep. It'd be nice to be able to challenge it and say, what's employee number 10? What are they earning this week? Or how much did they pay in taxes this week? And of course, you could have all kinds of variables here. How many bananas did we sell for that particular day? Again, we could choose that information. So let's do it again. And this time we want to find the customer. Well, let's see what it is. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the 5th column. So we want to bring back information from the 5th column, and we want to search it based on what's up here in I number 4, which is from the first column. So let's click here. I'm going to put in equal. I'm going to put in VLOOKUP. I could have typed it in, but I'm cheap. So we're going to click on that I4 again, because that's what I want to challenge. And I want to put a comma because I need to choose. So I'm selecting my table again. There you go. And I'll put a comma because that's where it's going to look it up. And I want it to return a value of the customer, which is the 5th column. So I'll put 5. I'll put a comma, and I want it to bring an exact match. So false. And I'll close that bracket. And this time it should bring back for agent number 3, customer number 3. Well, let's make sure. Press enter, and it's customer number 3. And if I decided to choose, let's say, somebody else, let's just say number 10. So I'll click number 10. It brings back customer number 10, and that would be right there. So customer number 10, and it says 60 for the price, and there's my price. So as you see here, by using a list or just simply typing in a value, I can now get information back from it, from that particular little table. This is a beautiful feature because it's used very frequently in business, but a lot of people, and here's the good news, a lot of people don't know how to use it. It's really simple, but you have to get your head around it and see what's happening. For a VLOOKUP, it will always be from the first column you are grabbing or challenging information. And of course, what you're returning will always be defined by the column you put in. So here I put in 4 for column 4, and that's where it's going to return the value based on what it discovered in that first column. So number 10, it automatically will return 60, and of course customer 10 for the one below it, and that's exactly what it returns here. So just for kicks, I'm going to show you how to create a list. Okay, so I'm actually going to use this particular agent again, and I'll do that by simply selecting this territory in a moment, but I'm going to put it, let's put it right here. So right there is where I'm going to put it. Actually, I'll use the list that's up here. That'll make it easier for us. And that means that I can actually do it here. So I'll just scroll a little bit there so we can see that more clearly. Oops. Let's just get some territory there. Okay, so I'm going to put it in here. I'm just going to scroll that up a bit. Can you see me now? Fantastic. There we go. So I'm going to create a list here of each one of these, so it'll make life easier for me, especially because I'm going to make this into a table. And I'm going to click here and I'm going to say, I want to choose a list. So how do I create a list? I go to data. And because I've selected that cell, I'm actually going to create a list in that particular cell. So I'll come over here to data validation in data. Now, if you do not write this down, you are not going to remember it, but this is data and data validation. Inside of data validation is this little dialog box. So let me do that one more time so you get to see it. I'm going to open up the ribbon for a second. There you go. So in here, data validation, in the data tab, that's this little icon, and I'm using data validation. This comes up and it's going to ask me, what exactly is it I want to do in settings? Well, I'd like to create a list. So I'm going to create a list. So I'll click on list. And then it wants to know where's the source. So I'll click on source. And now I'll come in here and I'll put that range in. Okay, so there's my range. Excuse me. And you notice that it has dollar symbols in front, which means it's an absolute reference. It will not change. Irrespective of what I do with that list, it will not change. So that's all I needed to do. And I'm going to click OK, because that's it. That's how easy it is. And now you'll notice a little drop-down arrow here. And when I click on it, there's my agents. And I can pick and choose any one I want. So let's choose 5. So now 5 is there. So I can reference that cell from now on and do something with it. So let's do that. Let's put in here that I would like to have, let's say, this column, L. So I'm going to choose this selection. There you go. That's the selection I'm going to use. And I'm going to use that for my VLOOKUP. So let's do that. Equal. And we'll use VLOOKUP. There's my VLOOKUP. And it says, what do I want to challenge against this little table? I want to challenge this cell. So this cell here, so I can change it using that list of mine. And I'll put a comma. Remember, with VLOOKUP, it always looks up in the first column. So I'm going to choose this selection. Okay, because whatever I choose up here, I want it to find it and then bring back a value in the second column. So I'm going to put a comma. And I know the numbers are in the second column, so I'm going to say 2, comma again, and I'm going to type in false. Okay, so it'll always be false. It'll always choose the first number that's associated with whatever this particular segment is up here. So if it chooses 5 correctly, it should bring back 45, which is agent 5. So let's press enter and get our 45. And the nice thing about this list, if I choose, let's choose number 8. That's a 50 as well, 50. Oops, hold on. There we go. So let's choose number 8. And now it changes to a 50. And if I want 1, that should be a 40. Where's 1? Up. There's number 1, so there's now a 40. So sometimes using these lists is actually not a bad deal. It's really easy to create a list. You can do it with numbers as well if you wanted to. So let me just create a list beside this, because maybe what I want to do is have a list of numbers. Maybe I want to create a form where people don't have to choose, don't have to type in. All they need to do is choose something, and it will automatically insert the information for them. So once again, I'll create a list. So data validation. Again, I'm choosing list this time. Good. What's the source? Well, the source will be, let's choose down to 4573. Since we already have 40, we'll leave it there. And that's my new list. I'll click OK because now it's done. And now I can pick and choose which number I want from that particular list. Fantastic.
Michael, how did you name a range in one of the previous sheets? You were able to name a range, you named it NUM.
Sure, that can be done as well. So in this situation here, let me come back to this one. I'm just going to delete that now. I'm going to get rid of it. Fantastic. So that
Michael,
that's me.
Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to say, like, today I have an appointment. Can I leave the class and do the quiz and watch
yes,
the video later?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Yep, take care. Okay, so again, so somebody wants to know, how do I name something? So let's just say that as we had here for this particular formula, we have a range, and this is my range here, K3 to L12. So this is my range, but I don't have to put that reference in. What I can do is simply name this. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to formula at the top. When I click on formula, there's a section called define a name. And I can define that name. So I'm going to click on it. And it says, what do you want to call it? I'm going to call it, we'll say AG list. So it's AG. Well, actually, let's just call it AG because that'll make it easy for everybody. And I'm going to say this workbook only. Now, there are choices that you can make above and beyond that. I'm going to choose just this workbook. This is the scope. This is where it can be used, and where it cannot be used is outside of this. And again, it's asking me, what is it? The range, and the range is already defined. So I'm going to click OK. And now you'll notice the name box here says AG. So let's go back to my formula. My formula said this whole range here. Well, what if I just type in AG instead of the range? Okay. It's still totally acceptable. In fact, it's even showing me below, I've named a range, and it's called AG. I could click on that as well. So if I press enter, it's the same thing, but I've now defined this particular grouping. If I highlight it, you'll see it shows me AG. Does that help?
Yes, thank you kindly.
Fantastic. So yeah, sometimes it's to your advantage to be able to do that, to be able to name something. I could have named this whole section, by the way. Now, the reason I didn't do this, of course, is to make it easier for you to learn how to use the ranges by simply selecting it. But you could type in that value as well. So here's the second one. That was VLOOKUP. But there's also the horizontal lookup, which is horizontally straddling your information across the page. There are two different ways of looking at it, and some people prefer horizontal. And in some situations, horizontal works better for you, and sometimes vertical works better for you. So if we wanted to do this the same way, once again, we're using agents, but this time they're horizontally placed across the page instead of being vertical. So here's our horizontal lookup. Again, I created a list for you to make it easier because you would have to have selected them all. So I'm going to choose number 1 so we can see the results right away. And it says price, cost, customer, find the revenue, and also the quantity. So I'm going to choose find the price. Well, let's just see, where is the price? The price is number 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's 4 rows down. So let's go back up here, and we'll now type in horizontal lookup. So let's just come across a little bit. Equal, and then horizontal lookup. There it is, horizontal lookup. Piece of cake. And now once again it says, what am I looking up? Well, I'm looking up that agent number 1. So I'm going to click on it. I'll put a comma. And then of course I want to be able to use a table. Well, my table needs to be selected. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select my table this time. So I'll choose agent 1 and just jump all the way across here to the other side of the planet. There we go. So now my selection is here. And if I go back to the beginning, you can see I did not include these names, the fields. I don't need them. I just need the data. And then, of course, when I come back up to horizontal lookup again. Okay, so let's just widen it a little bit. There we go. So I've named it group to make it easy for myself again. So I actually did give it a name, but you would put in the range that's here. Then I'll put a comma. And where do I want to bring that information from the price? Well, we already discovered it's row number 4. So I'll put in 4. I'll put a comma. And I'll put in false here because I only wanted to bring back the first entry it finds. So once again, false. I'll close the bracket. And I'll press enter because now it should bring back the same value that it discovers, which is price is 40. Let's just double check. I come down here. So agent number 1, price is 40, and there's number 40. So that means we should be able to do the other ones as well. Quantity is 2, revenue is 3, and 5 is customer. So we should be able to remember those, hopefully. And let's just come back up here. So customer, we're going to put that one as 5. So I'm going to type in again horizontal lookup. There you go. And once again, what am I challenging? I'm challenging that first cell, which is I-14. And I'll put a comma, and I'll put my group in here. See if the group is listed. No, it's not. Okay. So we'll put in group. There's group. So that's my range, by the way. I named it. Fantastic. Comma. And this was column, or sorry, row number 5. And it was false. Close that off and we'll get the information for that customer, customer number 1. And revenue was 3, and of course quantity was 2. So we can do the same thing. So once again, I'll type in horizontal lookup. There you go. And again, I'm challenging this agent number 1. And I'm going to put in my range again. There we go. Comma. And I wanted to bring back revenue. And once again, our revenue was actually on, oops, let's just bring that over a bit more. Revenue was our third column, third row, and quantity was our second row. So we know that. We'll come back here again. Fantastic. So we know this is on, excuse me, third, and we'll put a comma and false again. Close that bracket. We'll press enter, and that'll give us our 200, and we're going to do it one more time for our quantity, which was row number 2. So horizontal lookup again. And once again, we want that challenge here, which is I-14. And we'll put a comma. We'll put our particular range in. There's our range. Put a comma. And this was coming from row number 2. And we'll put in false because we want only the first entry. Whoops. Fantastic. And there's number 5. Now, you could actually come in here if you were so inclined and say, wait a minute now, I'd rather have them all in the middle. So, I mean, I can select this, go to the Home tab, and simply put them in the middle. And if I wanted a different color to come up for all of them, I can choose a different color. And now I can choose anybody I want. So let's say 3, and all the information from 3 comes up. And if I want something else, let's say 10, then the information for 10 comes up. So this is actually kind of a nice little tool. And here's another little caveat for you. It doesn't have to be on the same sheet. So if you wanted to, you could build this on another sheet and just jump between the sheets back and forth and grab the information that you wanted from the other sheet and therefore plug it in here. So every time I changed, let's say, the data I'm looking for, it would automatically return all those values. And for all intents and purposes, we could have these across the top so that I can pick and choose from each one of them a different agent and see that information brought down here. And maybe I have calculations at the bottom that give me how much they earned or how much commission or how many did we sell. So it's really a little bit of creativity when you're using these that you can do it in any way you want to. All I've done is simply to type in a title I'd like to use and then put a calculation beside it so that it looks as if whenever I change something, I automatically get new information each time. So I can actually use this over and over and over again and just keep adding to this particular, let's say, system, this database. Does that kind of make sense so far for VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Fantastic. Some of you are saying, oh my God, fantastic. Super duper. Well, that's why I gave you this document, so you can play around a little bit and experiment with these as well. And of course, it's easy enough to do. You just look very carefully when you're actually using one of these, just to identify what it says below it. You know, what am I looking up? Where am I looking into to find it? And then what do I want it to return? And then yes or no, in other words, true or false. The next one we want to take a look at, and there is another one here, is I'm jumping lookup because this is more like an advanced, as we start to look at more lookup feature, and there are many other ones. We're going to jump to goal seek. So here's my little buddy. Look at him. Isn't he cute? Fantastic. So here's my little buddy, and there's a few of these for you to play with. I'm not going to go through them. You can play around with them yourself. There are actually quite a few. Decount, forget it. Don't bother with it. This is an advanced course that we would actually go through these. And of course, I've created lists for each one of these. Decount is a very unusual type of count. It allows me to scrutinize, very similar to an if statement, but I can scrutinize by a large number of fields and then come up with some value in here based on the criteria. So let me go back to GoalSeek. Now, here's my GoalSeek, and this is a fascinating one. And the reason it's fascinating is because it's used for analysis. Let's say that I want to challenge this information. So let's just say, for instance, I'm not too happy with the information here. It says that if I was, let's say, purchasing something for $355,974, and I was putting 20% down on it. Let's just say I was buying a house and I was putting 20% down on it, and I'm going to pay over 360 months at an interest rate of 6.5%. Well, maybe I don't like that idea too much. So one of the fundamental things I can do is I can experiment with possibilities. Now, there are better tools in Excel, but they are very advanced. This is just a simple tool that allows you to change one value. So I'd like to change this 1800. That's why I've highlighted it for you, because I'm going to change this one first. There is a condition. That condition is as follows. Whatever you want to change must have a formula. So that cell must have a formula. So that's why each one of these four is actually a formula. We can play with these four. We just can't do very much with what's above here because they're not formulas. They're just straight values. So it's going to change these values itself. The computer will do that by itself. So I want to change the 1800. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go up to Data. The Data tab is where you're going to be going. And at the very far right-hand side, you're going to see What If. What if I change the value? Now, there are several tools here, but we're only going to use GoalSeek. Now, Scenario Manager in the advanced course, Data Tables in the advanced course, and there are other tools that we'll add when we get to the advanced course. But in this case here, we just want to do something simple. So GoalSeek, What If Analysis, and GoalSeek. And we get this tiny little dialog box. There it is. Let's hide the mousey. And it says, what do you want to what do you want to change? I want to change that cell, C11, that yellow one down here. And what do I want to change it to? I would prefer my monthly payments to be $1,500. So let me type in 1,500. What do you want to change? What's the most likely thing that you could, let's say, negotiate for? Well, in that case, by changing which cell, let's just say by changing the percentage. So what they charge me on a monthly basis. So I'll change that. So now that I've selected that cell, watch what happens. It'll try to find a solution using and modifying that particular interest rate in order to acquire $1,500 per month. And it found that the only way of doing it is to bring that interest rate down to 4.8%, and that'll allow you to make $1,500 as a payment. So let's just cancel that. And let's just do that again. So GoalSeek, and I just still want to change that value, but this time I'd like to change how many months I have to pay. And therefore, I'm going to say I want to change it to $1,500. Now that amount is arbitrary. I could put anything I want in. And what do I want to change? I want to change how many months I have to pay. So I'll click on that and I'll click OK. Whoa. This one's going to have a problem. And the reason is because of your interest rate. And it didn't come out very nicely, did it? From 360 months to 10,719 months. Fantastic. And it didn't quite reach 1,500. Now, there are times when it has real difficulty because remember, we're dealing with only one cell that can be changed. So the others have to remain the same in order to come up with the same value. I'm going to cancel that. Don't like that value. Let's try that again. So again, goal seek is really easy to use. And it is that one cell I want to change. So I'm going to change it to 1,700. And maybe what I want to do is change how much I have to put down on it. So I'll click on that. There you go. Now remember, whatever field you use to change, it has to be just a number. It cannot be a formula. But anything that you intend to change will be a formula. So let me click OK again. I want 1,700. And there's my 1,700. I'd have to put down 4% more, so 24%. And that would allow me to reduce my payment per month. Let's see if there's an alternative here. So let's cancel. And this time, what I'd like to do is change the interest. I don't like paying that much interest payment. So I'll click on that one instead. And okay, so I'll click on the interest payment, just checking the chat. And I'll go back to goal seek. So let me just pick that interest and go back to goal seek. And I'd like my interest to be only 250,000 instead of 363. You know, one of the fascinating things about buying a house is that by the time you end up paying it, you literally have paid double just in interest alone. And for the first 10 to 15 years, you're paying almost pure interest because they always want to get their money first. And of course, by changing what cell, well, I think the cell that we really want to change here is going to be the percentage. Again, we really need to change that to modify this a little bit. And of course, it goes through it and it says you would have to negotiate for 4.75% and your interest would drop by over $120,000. So this would really be a nice little tool. So once again, the easiest approach is it must actually be a formula. There has to be a formula for this value to be analyzed. And we want to change a value that is not a formula. So whichever one of these is not a formula, that's what we're going to change. So let's do one more. And I'm going to change the loan amount. The loan amount is based on the payments and the interest. So here it's also a formula. And we are going to do goal seek again. And we're going to change this. I'd like to make this the loan amount. Well, this is without the payment and interest. Let's choose the payments instead. Let me just choose the payments. Let's choose that one. So this is the total payments that you would have to make. Again, it's almost double the price of the loan. So let's change that a little bit. Let's just say we wanted to bring it down to 500,000, okay, which will reduce it by 148,000. And we're going to change the following. So let's change the principal amount. It'll go through it and it'll say the only way of actually bringing it down to that amount based on all the other information being equal is that you would only be borrowing 274,000. This is actually a really nice little tool. And the reason it's a nice tool is it has that what if scenario. What if I made a change here? What would happen if I did that? If I were buying a new car and I wanted to pay less, how do I pay less? Well, I choose the value I want to pay for my car. And let's just do that very quickly. I'm just going to put a new one in here, new sheet. I'm going to say my car costs, let me just put car here. Okay, and we'll put in interest underneath. Oops. AI. Interest, and we'll put in term. How long? Fantastic. So let's just put in here the car is $30,000. Most cars nowadays, by the time you buy the thing, it's going to cost you quite a bit. And we'll say that the interest here is going to be a percentage. And I'd say it's going to be 6%. 6%. And we'll say it's over 4 years, so 48 months. So that's a piece of cake. And of course, we could change these values a little bit. Now I'm going to put a formula in. You don't have to put this formula in yourself. Okay, this is just simply going to take care of that. So the rate, which in this case here happens to be 6%, comma, and I want the 48 months. Now I need to make one change there because I said per year and this is per month. So divide by 12. And then of course here it's going to be 48, which is okay because that's actually in years. So comma, and the principal value, which happens to be the $30,000. And I'll close that. So it should cost me $704 a month if this is the condition that I'm taking. I'll just zoom that up a little bit. Fantastic, there we go. So what if I didn't like this value too much? Well, I can change that. I'm going to change this, by the way, to a positive value. One of the reasons it's a negative is because I'm using a formula that will kind of subtract from the principal. So this will give me a positive, and I'll just highlight that. There we go. So let's say I wanted to pay only $500 a month. I didn't want to pay $700. Well, I can use that formula again. So let's go back here and get goal seek. And it says I want to change that one. So I'm going to change it by doing the following. I'd like to have $500 a month as a payment instead. And therefore, what do I want to change? Well, probably the one thing that I could change really quickly is how long I pay it for. So I'll click here and I'll click OK. So it says here I'd have to pay for 71 months in order to get the payments on a monthly basis down to 500. So that's not going to work very well because that's almost 7 years. So how can I? Well, actually, it's like 6 something. So 6 years. So what if I wanted to change this to 500, but I'll change the interest rate instead. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go back in here and we'll go goal seek. And this time I'll say I want that $500. And by changing what? Well, let's change that 6%. So this says I'd have to pay 11%. Oh, that's not happening, period. So let's try it again. Let's try this one more time. What if I decided to buy a cheaper car? So in other words, I want to get a bicycle. So I'll say $500 per month instead. And what am I going to change? I'm going to change that 30,000. So maybe I can put a down payment. How much of a down payment would I have to make up to buy a $30,000 car and only pay $500 a month? And this basically tells me literally I've got to come up with 8,900. So I've got to come up with quite a bit of down payment in order to get it down if I continue with what I have here. So this is actually, it's a nice tool because you can play around with it. Now, as I said, there are better tools in Excel, but they are very complicated. And this is why we usually leave them until the final, where you get into an advanced Excel, because there are literally many different ways of challenging not just one value, but all of the values at the same time, and coming up with different scenarios and then being able to see them all. This is another beautiful thing about pivot tables, by the way. They can do that. And we will be experimenting with those next week. So for the time being, this is more than enough for you to work on. You've got lots of things that you can play with here. Goal seek, you have the VLOOKUP and the horizontal lookup that you can play around with. Let me just bring that back to normal for a moment. So you have lots of things that you can play around with in this particular area. You also have the regular formulas that you're going to be using from time to time, especially the if. You will definitely be using the if statement. So make sure you get used to using if. It's a beautiful tool and it allows you to really experiment and play around. And when you think about it, as I've mentioned before, you can always use a formula inside of a formula. So the condition I'm using here in the if could actually have a sum in it or an average in it, or it could have a lot of different things in it. And we could actually add more and more and more different functions in there. In fact, there are other tools that we don't even touch upon in this course, which could actually do much more, much more. And of course, the other tools that you needed to be aware of for formulas, for the time being, this is enough, what's here. And predominantly, what I really do want you to focus on is average, medium, max, minimum, sum, and today. And of course, the rounding function. These are things that you should definitely be aware of. And also, the other thing that I want you to work on, make sure you do understand, is how to use the order of operations. Remember, play a little bit with this and you'll get a good feel for it. Why certain things have to be done in a specific way. Why brackets need to be used from time to time. Any questions thus far? A lot of quiet out there.
No, Michael.
No?
I think once we get a chance to kind of play around with it, it will make
That's true.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, you really do. You need to experiment. And as I said, that's why I'm giving you this document so that you can play a little bit and really kind of get into it. The training on Cengage and also the project is due by next week. And of course, the training you have opened for you, just make sure you're doing them. Some of you seem to be a little bit behind, and I definitely want you to pick it up a bit. So make sure those projects are being completed and that you're not jumping quizzes. Make sure you do those quizzes. This is very important for your final mark because it's accumulative. And even the mark you see in Cengage is not the mark that I put in for you. Mark I put in for you is slightly different. It's based on different calculations. So you need to make sure that you're doing every element within that. So just keep on top of them, keep working on them. And when you have a problem, ask me about it, but make sure you're attempting it. You're not just simply, oh, I don't understand this. Go and try to understand it. Try to make sense out of it. Because when it comes to a final exam or quiz, you will not know what you're doing. And if you're getting things wrong that you think are very simple, it's because you haven't practiced and you are making minor mistakes. So you definitely want to spend some time, especially the quizzes for formulas. Make sure you go over them a little bit. So having said all of that, I'm going to let you go to Cengage and have a phenomenal long weekend.
Thanks, Michael. You too.
Okay.
And then I think we don't have a class on the 25th of September as well. It's Professionals Day. I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a Friday.
Yeah.
But
So,
I'll make sense of it. Don't worry.
all right. Thank you so much, Michael.
Yep. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Michael. You too.
Yep.
Michael, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Have a good weekend, Michael.
So, okay. So once we download these worksheets that you have sent today in the chat,
Yep.
and we practice, if we have any doubt, can we message you? Can we?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because it's a long weekend. I don't know whether we can disturb you or not. So.
Well, I may not answer immediately. It'll be within 24 hours.
No problem. But at least we can send our queries, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not a problem at all.
Okay. Thank you. Have a nice long weekend.
Yeah. Take care.
Michael,
Go ahead.
I'm having trouble with my internet.
Okay.
So they kicked me off and I had to reload my phone again. So
Okay.